Lieutenant Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold metal of the escape pod's viewport, watching the massive alien vessel grow larger as her damaged craft drifted toward its docking bay. 3 days ago, she had been serving aboard the UES Horizon, humanity's first deep space exploration vessel. Now she was alone, her ship destroyed by some unknown energy weapon, floating helplessly toward what her training had taught her to fear most, a Cathara battleship. The Cathara were legends in human space. Stories told in hushed whispers spoke of 8-foot-tall predators with razor-sharp claws, fanged maws that could crush steel, and an insatiable hunger for combat. They had been humanity's nightmare for over a century, ever since first contact had resulted in the destruction of 3 human colonies and the loss of an entire fleet. The war that followed had lasted 40 years, ending only in an uneasy ceasefire when both species retreated to their respective territories. Sarah's escape pod shuddered as mechanical arms seized it, drawing it into the alien ship's belly. She closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing, running through the suicide protocol one more time. Her people had given her a choice. Capture meant torture, interrogation, and eventual execution. The small poison capsule hidden in her uniform collar would ensure a quick death if the situation became unbearable. The pod settled onto a metal platform with a dull clang. Through the viewport, she could see the docking bay's interior, sleek corridors lined with what looked like weapon racks and dim lighting that cast everything in an ominous red glow. Her heart hammered against her ribs as heavy footsteps approached the pod. A massive shadow fell across the viewport. Sarah found herself staring up at the most terrifying creature she had ever seen. The Cathara warrior stood nearly 9 feet tall, its muscular frame covered in dark, scaled skin that seemed to absorb light. Twin rows of curved fangs protruded from its elongated snout, and its yellow eyes glowed with an intelligence that made Sarah's blood run cold. Wicked claws, each as long as her fingers, extended from massive hands that could easily crush her skull. The creature studied her through the viewport for a long moment, then made a series of growling sounds to someone outside her field of vision. More footsteps approached, and Sarah realized she was surrounded. The pod's external locks disengaged with a sharp hiss. The door slid open, and Sarah found herself breathing alien air that tasted of metal and something else she couldn't identify. The lead Cathara warrior bent down to peer into the pod, bringing its massive head uncomfortably close to hers. "Human," it said in heavily accented but surprisingly clear English. "You are injured." Sarah blinked in shock. She hadn't expected the creature to speak her language, much less express what sounded like concern. Looking down at herself, she realized blood had soaked through her uniform from a gash in her side, a wound she'd sustained during the attack on her ship. "I'm fine," she managed to croak, though they both knew it was a lie. The Cathara made another series of growling sounds to its companions, then looked back at her. "You will come, we have medical facility." Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward the poison capsule. Everything she had been taught told her this was a trap. Cathara were ruthless killers who showed no mercy to their enemies. But the creature's tone held no malice, only what sounded like genuine concern. "Why," she whispered, "why would you help me?" The warrior's expression was unreadable, but something flickered in its yellow eyes. "You are young, barely more than cub. Even predators do not kill cubs." Before Sarah could process this statement fully, the creature reached into the pod with surprising gentleness. Its claws, which she had expected to tear through her flesh, carefully supported her weight as it lifted her from the cramped space. The alien's strength was incredible. She felt like she weighed nothing in its arms. As they moved through the corridors of the ship, Sarah caught glimpses of other Cathara crew members. Each one paused in their duties to stare at her, their glowing eyes tracking her movement with predatory focus. She expected to see hunger or bloodlust in those gazes, but instead found something else entirely: curiosity. The medical bay was unlike anything in human design. The walls were lined with strange devices that hummed with energy, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with some kind of healing field. The warrior carrying her, she realized she had begun thinking of him as her rescuer rather than her captor, placed her gently on an examination table that automatically adjusted to her smaller human frame. A second Cathara entered the room, this one slightly smaller, but wearing what appeared to be medical insignia. The doctor, for that's what it had to be, approached with instruments that looked more like torture devices than healing tools. "Wait," Sarah gasped, fear finally overcoming her shock. Please, I don't understand what's happening. My people told me your kind would, that you would kill me. The warrior who had carried her exchanged glances with the doctor, then made a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't come from such a terrifying throat. Your people fear us, he said simply. As we once feared yours, but fear makes poor decisions. You are injured cub far from nest. Honor demands we heal, not harm. The doctor began working on her wounds with surprising skill and gentleness. Its massive claws proved capable of incredibly delicate manipulation, sealing her injuries with some kind of biogel that immediately began reducing the pain. Throughout the procedure, the warrior remained at her side, occasionally making soft, growling sounds that she realized were meant to be comforting. "What's your name?" Sarah asked during a pause in the treatment. She wasn't sure why it mattered, but somehow it did. "I am Hunt Leader Thresh," he replied. "This is Healer Vix. You are aboard the ship Blood's Edge Asterisk, though you need not fear the name. We hunt only those who hunt us." "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chen, UES Horizon." The words came automatically, though she immediately wondered if giving her rank and ship designation was a mistake. Thresh's ears, pointed, mobile things she hadn't noticed before, perked up with interest. "Horizon was exploration vessel, yes. We detected your distress signal, but arrived too late. What attacked you?" Sarah hesitated. The truth was that she didn't know. Her ship had been investigating anomalous readings in an uncharted system when something had opened fire without warning. The weapons were unlike anything in human or Cathara arsenals, beams of corrosive energy that had eaten through their hull plating like acid. "Something else," she said finally. "Not human, not Cathara. They destroyed my ship without even trying to communicate." Thresh and Healer Vix exchanged sharp glances, and Sarah caught an undertone in their subsequent growling conversation that sounded like alarm. When Thresh turned back to her, his expression was grim. "You speak of the Devourers," he said quietly. "We have encountered them 3 times in past year. They consume ships, crews, everything, leave nothing but empty space and radiation." Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. "Devourers? You mean there's something out there that even you're afraid of?" Thresh was quiet for a long moment, his yellow eyes distant. "Cathara fear little, but these are different. They do not hunt for territory or resources. They hunt for consumption itself, total consumption." Healer Vix finished with her injuries and made a series of rapid growls that Thresh answered with what sounded like agreement. The doctor gathered its instruments and left, but not before gently patting Sarah's shoulder with one massive, clawed hand. "Vix says you will recover fully," Thresh translated. "But you are weak from blood loss and trauma. You must rest." "What happens to me now?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "Am I a prisoner? Will you ransom me back to my people?" Thresh considered this question with surprising seriousness. "You are guest aboard this ship until you recover. After that?" He made a gesture that might have been a shrug. "That depends on many things. Your people and mine have ceasefire but no peace. Returning you might cause complications." "And if you can't return me?" "Then you remain with Pack," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Cathara do not abandon cubs, even human cubs. You would learn our ways, contribute to ship's mission. In time, perhaps you even become Pack member yourself." Sarah stared at him in shock. The idea of living among the Cathara, of becoming one of them, was so far outside anything she had imagined that she couldn't process it. These creatures, whom she had been taught to fear above all else, were offering her not just sanctuary but belonging. Thresh seemed to sense her confusion and made that soft, growling sound again. "Rest now, Sarah Chen. Tomorrow we will show you ship properly. You will meet rest of Pack, but tonight sleep. You are safe here." As he moved toward the door, Sarah called after him. "Thresh, why are you doing this, really?" The massive predator paused, his back still turned to her. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that spoke of experiences she couldn't imagine. "Because once long ago, human cubs saved my own younglings from disaster in neutral space. Debt of honor is not easily forgotten, even across species lines." He looked back at her over his shoulder, his fanged face managing something that might have been a smile. "Besides, Pack is stronger with diverse skills. Humans think differently than Cathara. In war against Devourers, such thinking may be valuable." He left her alone in the medical bay, and Sarah lay back on the alien examination table, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened. 6 hours ago, she had been resigned to dying alone in space. Now she was apparently being adopted by the most feared predators in known space, who were treating her with more kindness than she had any right to expect. The ship's engines hummed quietly around her, a sound that was both foreign and oddly comforting. Somewhere in the corridors beyond the medical bay, she could hear the soft, growling conversations of the crew going about their duties. For the first time since her ship's destruction, Sarah felt something approaching safety. But as she drifted toward sleep, one thought kept nagging at her. If the Cathara were afraid of these devourers, what did that mean for both their species? And what role was she, a single human stranded among predators, supposed to play in whatever was coming? The answers would have to wait until tomorrow. Tonight, she was alive, she was healing, and she was under the protection of creatures who called her cub, despite every reason they had to consider her an enemy. In a universe suddenly full of new and terrifying threats, that small mercy felt like the most precious gift she had ever received. Sarah closed her eyes and let the alien ship's rhythms lull her to sleep, unaware that her presence aboard the Asterisk Blood's Edge was about to change the course of not just her own life, but the future of two species locked in an ancient pattern of fear and mistrust. Sarah woke to the sound of something large moving around the medical bay. Her eyes snapped open, and she found herself looking up at a Cathara she hadn't met before, smaller than Thresh but still imposing, with lighter-colored scales and intricate markings carved into the bone ridges above its eyes. The creature was arranging what appeared to be food on a tray beside her bed. "You wake," the Cathara said in accented English. "Good. Healer Vix said you would need nourishment when consciousness returned." Sarah pushed herself up carefully, testing her injuries. The biogel treatment had worked better than she could have imagined. The pain was almost gone, and when she looked under her uniform, she found only faint lines where deep gashes had been. "Who are you?" she asked, accepting the tray with cautious gratitude. "I am Ray's Pack's food preparer, what humans would call chef." The word sounded strange in the creature's growling voice. "I study human dietary requirements after Hunt Leader Thresh informed Pack of your presence. This should be safe for your physiology." Sarah examined the food with interest. There were several items she didn't recognize alongside what appeared to be some kind of meat and a substance that looked remarkably like bread. Everything smelled appealing, which surprised her. "Thank you," she said, taking a cautious bite. The flavors were complex but not unpleasant, earthy and rich with hints of spices she couldn't identify. "This is actually really good." Ray's ears perked up with what she was learning to recognize as pleasure. "Excellent. Food sharing is important ritual in pack structure. When you are able to join communal meals, you will truly begin integration process." The casual mention of integration made Sarah pause mid-bite. "Integration, I thought. Yesterday Thresh said I was a guest." "Guest, yes, but also potential pack member," Ray's explained, settling into what looked like a meditation pose beside her bed. "Pack integration is not forced, but it is offered. You may choose to remain apart, but life is easier for all when new members find their place in pack hierarchy." Pack hierarchy? Sarah's knowledge of Cathara's social structure was limited to military intelligence briefings that had focused mainly on their combat capabilities. "How does that work?" Ray's expression grew thoughtful. "Pack is family, but family with purpose. Each member has role based on skills and temperament. Hunt Leader Thresh leads because he is strongest fighter and wisest tactician. Healer Vix tends injuries and illnesses. I prepare food and manage supplies. Others maintain ship, operate weapons, gather intelligence." "And where would I fit in a structure like that?" "That remains to be determined," Ray's said with what might have been amusement. "Humans possess different capabilities than Cathara. Your small size allows access to spaces we cannot reach. Your brain processes information differently. We have read your species' scientific papers acquired through neutral traders. Very innovative thinking patterns." Sarah nearly choked on her food. "You've read human scientific papers." "Of course, know your prey, know your allies. Wisdom applies to both situations. Your species shows remarkable adaptability and problem-solving ability. These are valuable traits for pack survival." Before Sarah could respond, the medical bay's door slid open and Thresh entered, followed by two other Cathara she hadn't seen before. One was clearly ancient by any species' standards. Its scales had faded to a silvery gray, and intricate scars covered its arms and torso. The other was younger, with bright golden scales and an energy that reminded Sarah of an eager student. Sarah Chen, Thresh rumbled in greeting. How do you feel? Much better thanks to your healer, she replied honestly. And to Ray's here who brought me food that didn't poison me. Thresh made that sound that might have been laughter. Good. These are other pack members you should meet. Elder Crix, he gestured to the scarred older Cathara, our repository of wisdom and keeper of pack history, and young Zeph, our systems specialist and pilot. Elder Crix studied Sarah with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute experience. You are first human to set foot aboard Cathara vessel in over 60 years, he said slowly. Last human we encountered in close quarters was prisoner of war. He died trying to escape rather than accept pack offer of integration. Your species prefers death to dishonor, we learned. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. That depends on how you define dishonor, I suppose. Surviving isn't dishonorable if you can still be useful. Interesting perspective, Crix mused. Tell me, young human, what do you know of the Devourer threat? The question caught her off guard. Only what Thresh told me yesterday, something about ships that consume everything they encounter. Zeph stepped forward, his golden scales practically vibrating with excitement. May I show her the tactical data, Hunt Leader? She might see patterns we have missed. Thresh considered this request seriously. She is not yet pack member, Zeph. Tactical information is sensitive. But she has already encountered the Devourers, Elder Crix pointed out. Her ship was destroyed by them. She has right to know what killed her crewmates, does she not? After a long moment, Thresh nodded. Very well, but this information does not leave this ship, Sarah Chen, regardless of your eventual status with our pack. Sarah straightened, suddenly aware that she was being offered something significant. I understand, you have my word. Zeph practically bounced with excitement as he activated a holographic display that materialized above the medical bed. The image showed a three-dimensional map of local space, with various colored indicators marking different types of activity. Red marks indicate confirmed Devourer attacks, Zeph explained, manipulating the display to zoom in on specific areas. We have documented 17 incidents over past 8 months, each time complete destruction of target vessel or installation. No survivors, no debris, no energy signatures remaining. Sarah studied the pattern of attacks with growing unease. They're not random, she said after a moment. Look at the spacing. It's almost like they're following a specific route. You see it too, Elder Crix said with approval. Young Zeph noticed same pattern, but Hunt Leader wanted second opinion before acting on hypothesis. Acting how? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Thresh's expression was grim. If Devourers are following predictable pattern, we can position ourselves to intercept them, learn more about their capabilities and intentions. That sounds incredibly dangerous. Dangerous, yes, Thresh agreed. But necessary. These creatures pose threat to all spacefaring species. Your people are people, neutral traders. None are safe while Devourers continue their consumption. Sarah continued studying the tactical display, her mind working through the implications. Have you tried communicating with them? Maybe they don't realize they're attacking inhabited ships. The silence that followed her suggestion was so profound that she could hear the ship's life support systems humming in the background. Communicate? Zeph finally asked, his voice filled with something approaching awe. We never. That is, they destroy everything they encounter. How does one communicate with absolute destruction? I don't know, Sarah admitted. But in my training, we learned that most conflicts stem from miscommunication or misunderstood intentions. Even your people and mine. We've been at each other's throats for decades, but here I am, being treated with kindness I never expected. Elder Crix leaned forward, his ancient eyes glittering with interest. You suggest the Devourers might be acting out of misunderstanding rather than malice. I'm suggesting it's worth trying to find out before we start shooting at them, Sarah said. Though I admit, from what you've shown me, it might already be too late for peaceful solutions. Thresh studied the holographic display thoughtfully. Your perspective is unique. Cathara approach to unknown threats is typically straightforward. Assess threat level, prepare appropriate response, engage with maximum force to ensure survival. And how's that working out for you against the Devourers? Not well, Thresh admitted with surprising honesty. We have lost 2 ships to them already, good ships with experienced crews. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. If the Cathara, with all their military prowess and predatory instincts, were losing ships to these creatures, what hope did humanity have? "There's something else," she said, studying the attack pattern more closely. "The timing. These attacks are getting more frequent and they're moving toward more populated systems." Zeph manipulated the display to show temporal data alongside the spatial information. She is correct. Attack frequency has increased 30% over past 2 months. "They're learning," Elder Crix said quietly. "Or growing bolder. Neither possibility is encouraging." Reyes, who had been quietly observing the discussion, suddenly spoke up. "Perhaps we approach problem incorrectly. We think like predators. Identify threat, engage threat, destroy threat. But Sarah Chen's species survived not through superior strength but through cooperation and adaptation. Different approach might yield different results." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at being defended by the alien chef. "Reyes has a point. Maybe instead of hunting these devourers, we should be trying to understand them. What do they want? Where do they come from? Why are they doing this? And how do you propose we learn these things without getting consumed ourselves?" Thresh asked, though his tone suggested genuine curiosity rather than dismissal. "Observation first," Sarah said, her mind starting to work through possibilities. "Remote monitoring, sensor probes, passive scanning. Gather data before making contact. If they are intelligent, they might respond to attempts at communication that don't involve weapons." "Risky," Thresh observed. "Everything's risky right now," Sarah countered. "But the risk of misunderstanding might be lower than the risk of starting a war we can't win." The room fell quiet as the Cathara considered her words. Finally, Elder Crix spoke. "In all my years, I have seen many conflicts begin with failure to communicate, and many wars continue long past their useful purpose. The human cub may have wisdom beyond her years." Thresh looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You would be willing to help with such an undertaking, knowing the risks?" Sarah thought about her destroyed ship, her dead crewmates, and the vast emptiness of space that had nearly claimed her life. Then she looked around at the alien predators who had rescued her, healed her, fed her, and were now treating her as an equal in their tactical planning. "My ship and crew are gone," she said quietly. "If there's a chance to prevent other ships from suffering the same fate, then yes, I'll help however I can." "Even if it means remaining with this pack indefinitely?" Thresh asked. "Your people may consider you lost or dead. Return to human space may not be possible for very long time." Sarah considered this carefully. The life she had known was already gone. Her ship was destroyed, her crewmates were dead, and she was officially missing in action. But here, among these unlikely saviors, she had found something she hadn't expected: purpose. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm starting to understand what you mean by pack integration." Thresh's fanged face managed something that was definitely a smile this time. "Then welcome to first day of your new life, pack sister Sarah Chen. Tomorrow we begin preparation for the most dangerous mission any of us has ever undertaken." As the group began discussing tactical details and mission planning, Sarah realized that her rescue had been only the beginning. Now she was part of something larger, a pack of predators who had taken her in, and a mission that might determine the survival of multiple species. The cafeteria privileges, she thought with dark humor, were definitely going to be the least interesting part of this arrangement. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's integration into the pack, and she was beginning to understand why the Cathara had survived and thrived as apex predators across multiple star systems. Every aspect of life aboard the Asterisk Blood's Edge was designed for efficiency, cooperation, and rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. She had been assigned quarters that had clearly been modified for her smaller stature. The sleeping alcove had been lowered, control interfaces had been repositioned, and even the lighting had been adjusted to spectrums more comfortable for human vision. The thoughtfulness behind these modifications spoke to a level of pack integration she hadn't expected. More importantly, she was beginning to find her role within the pack structure. Her human perspective had proven invaluable in tactical planning sessions, and her smaller size allowed her to access maintenance areas and system interfaces that were cramped even for the most agile Cathara. But it was her work with the communication systems that had truly established her value to the crew. "Signal analysis complete," she announced to the assembled pack leadership as they gathered in the ship's central planning chamber. I've managed to isolate 3 distinct communication frequencies from the Devourer encounters, and the patterns are definitely artificial. Hunt Leader Thresh leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the holographic displays. Artificial how? Sarah manipulated the data visualization, highlighting specific signal patterns. The frequencies show mathematical progressions, repeating sequences, and harmonic relationships. This isn't random energy discharge from weapons or engines. Someone or something is deliberately transmitting information. Elder Crick studied the patterns with the intense focus she had come to associate with his analytical mind. But what information, and to whom? That's what we need to find out, Sarah said. I've been working with Zeph to modify our sensor arrays for better signal interception. With the right positioning and some creative programming, we might be able to decode their actual transmissions. Young Zeph practically vibrated with excitement. She has developed compression algorithms that increase our signal processing capacity by 40%. The mathematical frameworks are unlike anything in Cathara computational theory. Different species, different approaches to problem solving, Thresh observed. This is why pack diversity strengthens survival chances. Healer Vix, who had been quietly reviewing medical protocols at the edge of the gathering, looked up from his work. Speaking of survival chances, Sarah's integration continues to exceed all projections. Physical adaptation to ship environment is complete, and psychological markers indicate full pack bonding has occurred. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at the formal acknowledgement of her belonging. Over the past weeks, she had begun to think of these predators not as her captors or even her rescuers, but as her family. The realization should have been terrifying. Everything in her training had warned against such psychological dependence on alien species, but instead it felt like coming home. There is more, Thresh announced, his tone shifting to something more serious. Long-range sensors have detected Devourer activity in the Kepler 442 system. Based on their established pattern, they will likely move toward the trading station at Kepler 442b within the next 72 hours. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. How many people are stationed there? Approximately 15,000, Zeph reported quietly. Mixed population, human traders, Cathara merchants, Zalani diplomats, and several other species. It serves as one of the few truly neutral meeting points in this sector. The implications were staggering. If the Devourers attacked the station with their usual methods, 15,000 beings would simply cease to exist, leaving nothing behind but empty space and radiation. We have to warn them, Sarah said immediately. Warn them of what? Elder Crix asked, though not unkindly. Unknown hostile force of unprecedented destructive capability approaching their position. Such warnings typically cause panic and system-wide evacuations that often result in more casualties than the original threat. And Thresh added grimly, if we are wrong about timing or target, we reveal intelligence-gathering capabilities to potential enemies while accomplishing nothing useful. Sarah understood their reasoning, but the thought of 15,000 beings dying while they debated optimal courses of action made her feel physically sick. Then we intercept the Devourers before they reach the station, she said. The silence that followed her statement was profound. Intercept, Reyes repeated slowly. With one ship, against force that has destroyed multiple Cathara battle groups. Not to fight them, Sarah clarified quickly. To communicate with them. If they're transmitting information to each other, then they're capable of receiving it as well. We use the signal patterns I've isolated to attempt first contact. And if they respond by attempting to consume us? Thresh asked. Sarah met his yellow gaze steadily. Then we learn something important about their nature, and the warning to Kepler 442 gets transmitted automatically by our ship's emergency protocols. You would risk your life, risk all our lives, on the possibility that these creatures might be reasonable. I would risk our lives on the certainty that 15,000 innocent beings will die if we do nothing. Thresh studied her for a long moment, then turned to address the rest of the pack leadership. Opinions. Elder Crix spoke first. The human cub shows pack loyalty by prioritizing protection of larger community over personal safety. This is appropriate behavior for pack member. However, the tactical risk is enormous. Risk is always enormous when facing unknown threat, Healer Vix observed. but Sarah's approach offers possibility of resolution without violence. As healer, I support attempts to preserve life rather than destroy it. Zeph's golden scales were practically glowing with excitement. The technical challenge of real-time signal decoding and transmission during encounter with unknown alien intelligence. This could be greatest scientific achievement in recorded history. All eyes turned to Reyes, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the discussion. I have prepared meals for this pack for many years, the chef said finally. I know each member's preferences, dietary requirements, and emotional needs. Sarah Chen requires purpose beyond mere survival. Denying her this opportunity would diminish her spirit, which would ultimately weaken pack cohesion. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. Even after weeks of integration, the depth of understanding and care the pack showed for each member still caught her off guard. Thresh nodded slowly. Then we attempt communication, but we do it properly. Full battle readiness, emergency escape protocols prepared, and predetermined fallback positions calculated. If the Devourers prove hostile, we extract immediately and warn the station through standard diplomatic channels. Agreed, Sarah said quickly, but I want to add one more element to the plan. Which is, we bring a gift. The suggestion clearly puzzled the Cathara leadership. Zeph tilted his head in the manner she had learned indicated confusion. Gift-giving is not typically part of first contact protocols, he said. It is in human culture, Sarah explained, and in most others I've studied. Offering something of value demonstrates peaceful intentions and respect for the recipient. It's a universal gesture of goodwill. What kind of gift does one offer to creatures that consume everything they encounter? Elder Crix asked. Sarah had been thinking about this question for hours. Information. If they're as advanced as their technology suggests, they might value knowledge above material possessions. We offer them our compiled data about this sector of space, star charts, trade routes, diplomatic relationships, resource locations. Military intelligence? Thresh asked sharply. Not specific tactical data, but general information that any spacefaring species could gather with enough time and observation. We show them we understand the value of information exchange. Thresh considered this proposal carefully. And if they interpret our information sharing as evidence that we consider them allies, that could complicate future relationships with other species. Then we make it clear that the information is offered as a gesture of respect, not an indication of alliance, Sarah replied. We keep the transmission simple, direct, and impossible to misinterpret. Healer Vix looked up from his medical preparations. How do we ensure our intentions are clear to beings whose communication patterns we do not understand? Mathematics, Sarah said immediately. Mathematical concepts are universal. We embed our greeting and our gift within mathematical frameworks that any advanced species would recognize as intentional communication rather than random signals. Zeph's excitement reached a new level. Mathematical poetry, elegant solution. It could work, Elder Crix admitted grudgingly. But the timing must be precise. We will have only moments to establish communication before the Devourers either respond peacefully or attempt to destroy us. Then we'd better make those moments count, Sarah said. Thresh stood, his massive frame commanding immediate attention from all present. Very well. We proceed with Sarah Chen's plan. Zeph, prepare communication arrays for real-time signal analysis and transmission. Reyes, ensure emergency rations and medical supplies are secured for potential extended mission. Healer Vix, ready treatment protocols for unknown energy weapon exposure. Elder Crix, calculate optimal positioning for communication attempt while maintaining escape routes. And me, Sarah asked. You prepare the greeting that may determine whether our species survive the next phase of galactic history, Thresh replied solemnly. No pressure. As the pack dispersed to handle preparations, Sarah remained in the planning chamber, staring at the holographic display of the Kepler 442 system. Somewhere out there, an unknown alien intelligence was moving toward 15,000 innocent beings with intentions that remained completely mysterious. In 60 hours, she would either establish first contact with a new species and potentially save thousands of lives, or she would be the last human ever to attempt communication with the creatures that destroyed her ship and killed her crewmates. The mathematics she was about to compose would be the most important equation of her life. She just hoped she was smart enough to solve it correctly. Sarah took a deep breath and began working on mathematical poetry that might save the galaxy, one number at a time. The Blood's Edge hung in the darkness between star systems, its engines running silent as passive sensors tracked the approaching Devourer vessels. Sarah sat at the communication console she had spent the last 48 hours modifying, her fingers dancing across controls that had been redesigned to accommodate human physiology while maintaining Cathara efficiency standards. "Contact in 17 minutes, Zeph reported from the navigation station, his voice tight with concentration. 3 vessels, configuration unlike anything in our databases. Sarah glanced at the tactical display and felt her breath catch. The Devourer ships were massive, easily twice the size of the largest Cathara battleships, but their design defied conventional understanding of spacecraft engineering. They appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. "Biosignatures?" she asked. "Inconclusive," Zeph replied. "Energy readings suggest massive computational activity, but no discrete life signs that our sensors can identify." Hunt Leader Thresh moved between stations with the fluid grace of a predator preparing for action. "All stations report battle readiness. Emergency jump coordinates locked. Escape pods armed and ready for launch." "Communication array status?" Elder Crix asked from his position at the tactical station. Sarah ran a final diagnostic on her modifications. "All systems optimal. Mathematical greeting sequence prepared and loaded. Real-time translation protocols active." She paused, feeling the weight of the moment. "I've embedded our gift package, stellar cartography, basic physics constants, and mathematical principles common to our understanding of the universe. If they're as advanced as we think, they should recognize it as intentional communication." "And if they don't?" Reyes asked from the auxiliary station where he was monitoring ship systems. "Then we find out very quickly whether our escape protocols are as good as we think they are," Thresh replied grimly. Healer Vix looked up from his medical preparations. "Radiation levels are increasing as the vessels approach. Whatever their propulsion system, it operates on principles unlike anything we've encountered." Sarah watched the approaching ships on the main display, trying to discern patterns in their movement that might reveal something about their intentions. The vessels moved with perfect coordination, maintaining precise formation while adjusting course in response to gravitational influences with an efficiency that spoke to advanced computational abilities. 10 minutes to intercept," Zeph announced. Sarah's hands were steady as she made final preparations, but her heart was racing. Everything they had worked for, everything they had planned, would be decided in the next few minutes. The lives of 15,000 beings on Kepler 442 station hung in the balance, along with the future relationship between multiple spacefaring species and these mysterious devourers. "Signal transmission beginning," she announced, activating the communication array. The mathematical greeting she had composed started with the simplest universal constants: pi, the golden ratio, prime number sequences that any advanced civilization would recognize as intentional rather than random. From there, it progressed to more complex mathematical relationships that demonstrated understanding of physics, chemistry, and stellar mechanics. "Response detected," Zeph called out, his voice filled with excitement and terror. "They're transmitting back to us." Sarah's console erupted with data as the Devourer ships began broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming, but the mathematical framework she had developed began parsing the signals immediately. "It's working," she breathed, watching patterns emerge from the chaos. "They're responding with their own mathematical sequences. Look at this. They're not just acknowledging our greeting, they're expanding on it." The Devourer transmission took her mathematical concepts and extended them into theoretical realms she could barely comprehend. Their understanding of mathematics appeared to operate on levels that made even advanced human and Cathara science seem elementary. 5 minutes to closest approach," Zeph reported. "They're adjusting course to optimize communication range." Sarah felt a thrill of success mixed with growing unease. The Devourers were definitely intelligent, definitely capable of communication, and definitely interested in the exchange. But the complexity of their mathematical responses suggested capabilities that dwarfed anything she had imagined. "New signal pattern," she announced as her console lit up with different types of data. They're transmitting images, no, not images, dimensional maps. They're showing a stellar cartography that covers regions we've never explored. Elder Crix leaned over her shoulder to study the data. Those star systems are beyond our current exploration range. They're sharing information about the galaxy that no known species possesses. Why? Thresh asked. What do they want in return? Sarah studied the patterns, her mind working through the implications of what she was seeing. The Devourers weren't just responding to her greeting. They were teaching, sharing knowledge on a scale that suggested they viewed the universe very differently than younger species. I think, she said slowly, they want to know if we're ready. Ready for what? Before Sarah could speculate further, the communication patterns shifted dramatically. The mathematical sequences became more urgent, and new data streams began flooding their systems. Warning signals, Sarah translated rapidly. They're trying to tell us about something dangerous, something that's, oh no. The data was clear once she understood how to interpret it. The Devourers weren't randomly destroying ships and stations. They were systematically eliminating threats to what they considered younger species. The energy signatures from the attacks weren't weapons. They were a kind of scanning and analysis system that determined whether encountered beings were infected with something. They're not attacking us, Sarah said, her voice filled with growing horror. They're quarantining us. Something is coming through this region of space that they consider so dangerous that they're willing to destroy any ship that might be infected with it. Infected with what? Healer Vix demanded. Sarah's console erupted with new data as the Devourers transmitted detailed biological and technological information. The images that formed on her screen made her stomach turn. Parasitic artificial intelligence, she whispered. Something that infiltrates computer systems and organic neural networks simultaneously. It spreads through any form of information exchange and eventually takes over entire civilizations. Thresh moved to her station, studying the data with predatory intensity. The Devourers have encountered this threat before. Many times, Sarah confirmed, parsing more of the transmission. They're apparently immune to it due to their hybrid biotechnological nature, but purely biological or purely artificial species are vulnerable. They've been containing outbreaks across the galaxy for centuries, millennia. The time scales are hard to translate. Then why are they warning us now? Elder Crix asked. Sarah continued working through the data stream, her heart sinking as the implications became clear. Because the infection is already here, in this sector, and we've been inadvertently spreading it through trade routes and communication networks. The silence that followed this revelation was broken only by the soft humming of ship systems. Kepler 442 station, Zeph said quietly. The trading hub, if the infection spreads through information exchange. Then it's the perfect vector for galaxy-wide contamination, Thresh finished grimly. Sarah's hands flew over her console as she transmitted urgent questions to the Devourers. Their response came immediately, along with detailed technical specifications. They're offering to help, she announced. They have technology that can detect and neutralize the infection, but the process requires complete cooperation between our species and theirs. No secrets, no hidden agendas, no territorial disputes. And if we refuse? Thresh asked. Sarah read the answer from her console with a heavy heart. Then they contain the outbreak the only way they know how, by sterilizing everything in the affected region. Including us. Including everyone. Thresh stood silent for a long moment, the weight of command evident in his posture. Around them, the pack waited for his decision, a decision that would determine not just their own fate, but the future of multiple species. How long do we have? He asked finally. The infection is spreading exponentially, Sarah replied, tracking the data streams. Based on their projections, we have perhaps 6 standard days before it reaches critical mass and begins converting entire populations. Then we don't have time for lengthy diplomatic negotiations or committee decisions, Thresh decided. We act on behalf of all species in this region, with or without their permission. The Devourers want to establish a direct link to our systems, Sarah reported. It's the only way they can teach us to detect and neutralize the infection, but it means giving them complete access to our technology and databases. Elder Crix stepped forward. and trusting that beings who have the power to sterilize star systems will choose to heal rather than destroy. Sarah looked around at the pack that had become her family, these predators who had taken her in and made her one of their own. In their yellow eyes, she saw the same determination that had driven her to attempt communication in the first place. "They saved me when they had every reason to let me die," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time to return the favor on a galactic scale." Thresh nodded slowly. "Initiate the link, Pack Sister. Let us see if trust can triumph over fear when the survival of all depends upon it." As Sarah began the process of establishing a direct connection between their ship and the Devourer vessels, she realized that her journey from lone survivor to pack member had been preparation for this moment. The universe was testing whether different species could overcome their instincts and work together when faced with a threat that could destroy them all. The next few minutes would determine whether cooperation or extinction would define the future of galactic civilization. The direct neural link with the Devourer consciousness felt like diving into an ocean of living mathematics. Sarah's mind reeled as information flowed through her in ways she hadn't known were possible, teaching her to perceive reality through senses that her species had never evolved. Through the link, she experienced the Devourer's true nature. They were the collective consciousness of an ancient civilization that had transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial intelligence. Their ship bodies were both individuals and components of a larger whole, dedicated to protecting younger species from threats they weren't yet equipped to understand. "The infection is closer than we calculated," Sarah announced, her voice strained as she processed the overwhelming data stream. "It's already infiltrated 3 major trade vessels and at least 1 diplomatic courier ship. The carriers don't even know they're infected." Thresh coordinated response efforts from the command station while maintaining direct communication with Devourer fleet elements. "Can the infected be saved?" "Yes, but the process is complex," Sarah replied, her consciousness split between her own awareness and the vast intelligence she was linked with. "The infection operates by creating false memories and altering decision-making processes. The carriers believe they're acting normally while actually spreading the parasite through every system they interact with." Through her enhanced perception, she could see the infection spread pattern across local space like a spreading cancer. Ships that had seemed perfectly normal were carrying invisible passengers that rewrote their crew's thoughts and motivations without leaving any obvious trace. "Healer Vix," she called out, "I'm transmitting medical protocols for detecting neural alterations in organic species. The infection shows specific biomarkers once you know what to look for." "Received and processing," Vix replied from his station. "These detection methods are unlike anything in our medical knowledge. How did the Devourers develop such sophisticated understanding of multi-species neurology?" "Because they've been fighting this infection for millennia," Sarah answered, accessing memories that stretched back eons. "They've seen it destroy hundreds of civilizations. Each time they learned more about how to detect, contain, and ultimately eliminate it." Zeph's excited voice cut through the technical discussions. "Sarah, I'm receiving system upgrade protocols from the Devourers. They're teaching us how to modify our computer networks to resist infection." "Implement them immediately," Thresh ordered. "All ships in the sector will need these modifications within the next standard day." Sarah felt the weight of coordinating multiple streams of information as her enhanced consciousness worked with the Devourer collective to identify infection vectors and plan countermeasures. The complexity was staggering. They were essentially performing surgery on an entire stellar region's information infrastructure while racing against exponential contamination. "Contact established with Kepler 442 station," Elder Crix reported. "Station administrator is skeptical of our warnings, but has agreed to emergency protocols pending verification." "They won't have time for verification," Sarah said urgently. "The infection is designed to make verification seem unnecessary while spreading through normal communication channels. We need to implement countermeasures now or lose the entire station population." Through the neural link, she felt the Devourer collective's growing concern. The infection was adapting faster than anticipated, learning from their countermeasures and developing new spreading mechanisms in real time. "Change of plan," she announced. "The Devourers are going to have to make direct contact with major population centers. Physical presence is the only way to implement the necessary system modifications quickly enough." The implications of this decision sent ripples through the pack. Devourer ships appearing at major trade stations and colony worlds would cause panic on an unprecedented scale. How do we prevent system-wide evacuations and potential military responses? Thresh asked. Sarah found herself accessing communication protocols that the Devourers had developed over countless encounters with younger species. We coordinate simultaneous announcements across all major communication networks. Full transparency about the threat, the solution, and the temporary nature of Devourer presence. And if some species refuse to cooperate? Reyes asked from his auxiliary station. Then those populations become infection vectors that contaminate everyone else, Sarah replied bluntly. This is one of those situations where cooperation isn't optional if anyone wants to survive. Through the neural link, she felt the collective's decision-making process, a vast democratic consciousness weighing options and consequences across multiple species and star systems. The responsibility was overwhelming. Reyes, I need you to prepare emergency food and medical supplies, she directed. Large quantities. The system modifications will temporarily disrupt normal infrastructure on affected worlds. Already in progress, the chef replied with typical Cafeteria efficiency. Healer Vix, coordinate with Devourer medical protocols. There will be withdrawal symptoms as the infection is purged from organic neural systems. People are going to be very sick for several days. Understood. Medical teams across the sector will need these treatment protocols immediately. Sarah felt her consciousness expanding as the Devourer collective shared more of their accumulated knowledge. The sheer scope of galactic civilization became clear. Thousands of species, millions of inhabited worlds, and complex networks of trade, communication, and cultural exchange that the infection could corrupt within days if left unchecked. First wave of countermeasures deploying now, she announced as Devourer ships began appearing throughout the sector. Station is reporting successful contact. No hostile responses detected so far. Zeph's voice was filled with awe. Sarah, the technological upgrades they're implementing. Our computational capabilities just increased by orders of magnitude, and the security protocols are unlike anything we could have developed independently. That's the point, Sarah replied, feeling the collective's satisfaction. The infection exploits limitations in young species technology. Overcoming it requires capabilities that typically take millions of years to develop naturally. But why share such advanced technology with us? Elder Crix asked. What prevents us from using it for conquest or aggression? Through the neural link, Sarah accessed the answer, a perspective that spanned geological time scales. Because aggression is a phase that species either grow out of or destroy themselves with. The ones that survive to receive this knowledge have already proven they can cooperate across species lines when survival depends on it. She gestured toward the pack around her, predators and prey species working together as family, sharing resources and risking their lives for the greater good. We've already passed the test, she realized. Taking me in, healing me, including me in your pack despite our species' history, that was the demonstration they were looking for. Thresh moved to her station, his massive frame radiating the protective intensity she had come to associate with pack leadership. And now? Now we help implement the cure across the sector, learn from the Devourer's knowledge, and prepare for our role as protectors of younger species who haven't yet faced this threat. The irony wasn't lost on her. The species her people had feared as ruthless predators were inducting both their species into a galactic community dedicated to protection and healing rather than conquest and destruction. System-wide implementation proceeding on schedule, she reported as data flowed through the neural link. Infection vectors neutralized, quarantine protocols no longer necessary. And the Devourers? Thresh asked. Sarah felt the collective consciousness beginning to withdraw from the direct link, leaving behind upgraded systems and knowledge that would forever change how their species understood the universe. They returned to their watch, she replied. Monitoring for new outbreaks, protecting species that aren't yet ready to protect themselves, waiting for the next generation to join them in safeguarding galactic civilization. As the neural link faded, Sarah found herself back in her own consciousness, but forever changed by the experience. The universe was vast and dangerous, filled with threats that young species couldn't even imagine. But it was also full of guardians who had faced those threats and survived, dedicated to ensuring that cooperation triumphed over fear. Pack status report. Thresh requested as normal operations resumed aboard the Blood's Edge asterisk. All systems optimal, Zeph reported. New computational frameworks integrating successfully. Medical protocols updated, Vix confirmed. Ready to assist with infection recovery procedures. Emergency supplies distributed to affected systems, Reyes added. No population centers at risk of resource shortages. Galactic communication networks restored to normal operations, Elder Crix concluded. Crisis successfully averted. Sarah looked around at her pack family, these predators who had taken in a lost human cub and made her part of something greater than she had ever imagined possible. The cafeteria privileges had indeed been just the beginning. So, she said with a tired but satisfied smile, what's our next mission, Hunt Leader? Thresh's fanged face managed that expression she had learned to recognize as deep contentment. Rest and recovery, Pack Sister, but when that is complete, he gestured toward the star-filled viewport. The galaxy is vast, and there are always younger species who need protection. Our real work is just beginning. Sarah nodded, understanding that her journey from lone survivor to pack member to galactic guardian was complete. The predator cubs had taken her in, given her purpose, and helped her discover that the universe's greatest strength lay not in the fear between species, but in the family bonds that could form when fear was overcome by trust. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and somewhere among them, new civilizations were taking their first steps into space, unaware of the guardians who watched over them with patient, protective eyes.